I'm Blaise, and welcome to this week's episode of the Acronym Series, where we sit down with 3 gay icons to unpack their identity. Don't forget to check out last week's video, Lesbian Conversations, where Amu sat down with 2 lesbian icons. And subscribe, click the bell, like, comment down below if you like this video, and leave any suggestions if you might have. Now let's get into the conversation. I'm going to introduce you to each one of them. But before I do, I want them to say their names and their pronouns, and then we can move forward.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Viwe. My name is Viwe, and my pronouns are he and they.
My name is Githan, and my pronouns are he and him as well.
And I'm Fabi, and my pronouns are he, they.
All right. So thank you very much for joining us. We have Githan, who is a Cape Town-based creative who handcrafts beautiful abstract jewelry. We have Viwe, who's a writer for the Arts Park and is also the former chairperson of RAINBOWUCT. And we also have Fabi, who by day graces the internet with iconic gay queer content, and by night dresses up as the iconic Joburg drag queen Vine. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to be unpacking a whole lot of issues, some suggested by members, but some that, are just really prevalent and really important things within the gay community that we do need to unpack. So before we do get kind of into everything, I'm kind of interested to hear, if you're comfortable speaking about it, what was your coming out experience?
I can go first for this one, if everyone wants, because mine was pretty easy. I think when we have this discussion, especially about coming out, privilege is something that's super important to discuss. So when I came out, I'm obviously white, I'm middle class. I had the privilege of coming out in a private school space. So when I came out, I was 16, officially, but a lot of people knew that I was gay already from the time I was 13 or 14 because I knew. And it was actually a really difficult process getting to being comfortable with coming out. I had a lot of aggression and a lot of anger as a young child. And I think the first time I ever told myself that I was gay, I was 12. And only when I reached that point did I, become comfortable with myself. And then by the time I was 16, I told my parents and then started living life kind of as an openly gay person.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else feel comfortable sharing their coming out experience?
I'm happy to go. Mine was not dissimilar to Fabi's. I think I definitely, it's really weird because, we talk about privilege in a lot of ways, but there are various types of privilege, and there's emotional privilege and, economic and monetary privilege. And I think from an emotional perspective, my parents were very liberal. So, and I have an older gay brother who's 10 years my senior, and he's also gay. And I think coming out for him was a lot more difficult than it was for me. But my basic coming out was that I didn't say anything to my parents or had a boyfriend or anything up till the age of 19. And then when I was 19, I brought a boy home one day and I was like, this is so-and-so and he's staying over. Although, yeah, and he did. And my parents were fine with it. But there was never a conversation of, I like dick. It was a lot more, it was kind of, and I'm a bit sad about that because I think, not in the way to grieve or mourn the previous years of our lives where we've had to actually withhold that information from ourselves and with the ones that we care about most. Because like you said, I knew that I was gay from, it was either 12 around there, like you say, or it was closer to 9. But I know the instant was very specific. It was when I walked into a Virgin Active Gym locker room. I was there with my dad and one of his work colleagues or friends and his kid. And we all went in, and I went into the locker room, and it was the first time I'd ever been into a men's locker room, a public one. I was just like, okay, I'm gay. And I remember it was really funny because I remember canonizing in my mind, in my like 9 or 12-year-old mind, like, when I sit on the couch with Oprah one day and she says to me, when did you like realize for the first time that you were gay? This is what I'm going to say. Yeah, that's basically my coming story.
That's really lovely. And it's really amazing that the both of you had such smooth coming out experiences. And touching on what Fabi says, it really is important, I guess, from being queers of privilege, to highlight the fact that, we do come from privilege, and it's a lot easier for us to, live freely, but that isn't necessarily the truth for a lot of people out there in the world.
So mine, sorry to interject, mine wasn't that easy leading up to me coming out, but the coming out itself was fine. Like, I just walked into my parents' room and was like, hey, this is my tea. But before that, I'd actually been outed because my dad is a teacher at my old high school, and I had downloaded Grindr, like obviously underage, because I didn't understand what it was for at the time, and I very quickly found out.
Oh, honey, it's a recipe app.
Exactly.
Omelets on there.
Yeah, trust me, I learned how to cook something, bitch. But so then someone actually took my profile from the school. Someone took my profile to my dad and showed him that. And then he came in and had a whole discussion with me about, it's fine if this is who you are and whatever. And that was 2 years before I actually came out. But from that point, I think my parents had already known for a while, and they'd kind of like, I think maybe like your parents with your brother, having the time to get used to it, maybe because
it's a buffer.
My parents knew. Exactly, yeah. So then when I actually said it, it was a case of like, everyone can breathe now,
Yeah.
But now I'm done.
Do you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, of course. I've written about it sort of in a public space, so everybody knows. So my coming out was a process of, I'd say, about a good 6 years, 6 or 7 years of denying that I was, rumors, people talking within the family. There was a lot of speculation, but I'd always grown up being a gender non-conforming kid. I was always playing with dolls, and 1 minute, and then I'd be playing with trucks the next, and I'd, very flamboyant, which I'm like, what? So when I got to, I think I was about 13 or 14, when I got into an all-boys school, and the space was very masculine, hyper masculine, and there were people who kind of knew my family and that went to the same school, and word got to my parents that I had these gay friends. And I mean, I was a drama kid in high school. I was in drama and choir, but I also played hockey. So Same. The friends that I was kind of with, in a way, because at home I was very, I kind of presented a very non-sexualized or non-gay, in a non-gay manner, I guess, if there's even such a thing. But at school I was more free, and I had friends, and I got into and so when the word got to my parents that I was hanging out with these other boys who were gay, there was confrontation at home about who was I hanging out with, were they good people, meaning were they gay or not. So for a number of years while I was in high school, I denied the fact that I was into guys. even though I personally had known that I liked boys from baby, like probably from as soon as I could realize that there was a possibility to or be attracted to another person, even if it's not sexual, but just to like someone. And a lot of the people that I think I admired and looked up to as a kid were probably people that I was perhaps attracted to. So I denied it for a while, and then eventually, after a number of things happened with my parents, including being told that I could be kicked out of the house, disowned, all of that, the threats and stuff. Eventually, I was like, you know what? I think I was in grade 11 at the time, grade 10 or grade 11. I said, I'm gay, and what about it? And then this was just before the school year started. So I think it was just before, yes, it was at the end of grade 11 before matric started. And my mother said, you have 3 or 4 days to decide whether you're going to be gay and continue to be gay, or you're going to be the child that we raised and be straight. Because we're not going to waste our money buying you all the stationery and uniform and stuff that you need for the year, and we're not going to pay for your for the school fees. So you have 4 days to decide. And that was the last time I denied that I was gay. Actually, I've told this story so many times, but it's actually so difficult telling it now. Which is so weird.
It's really harrowing. I mean, it's incredibly sad.
I don't think it's weird at all. I mean, it's making me upset hearing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think, what do you feel that the feelings of kind of like why do you think it is so hard for you to tell it this time around?
I think, well, for now, like the lockdown has definitely affected my mental health. And I know someone who's currently experiencing, actually a number of people who are experiencing unfavorable circumstances in their family homes. And so they've had to, hide who they are or be confronted with homophobia and all of the prejudices that come with that. So I think being in that kind of mental space has really kind of also made me think about my experience and how, like Fabi was saying, the privilege of being able to be yourself is really important, and to acknowledge. And I think even the lockdown itself, without attaching any kind of gender and sexuality to it, is kind of like made us realize as people, as a society, that there definitely is disparity in society, with people who have and people who don't, and people who are able to be safe and people who are able to, people have many like rooms in their house and they're able to go to the gym, the home gym, and there's people who aren't able to even go out for essential services and products. So yeah, I think that's what I'm being faced with, I guess, and why it is at this point so difficult, I guess, to tell my story, or so emotive.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a short break. Sorry, Githan's disappeared, and I don't want to continue the discussion without him.
Sure.
Let me just pause this recording. Hey. Okay, we're back. Apologies, we're just having some technical difficulties, but everyone is back, and the discussion continues. And before the break, Viwe was talking about safe spaces, and I really do want us to unpack that. How do we define safe spaces? Like, to each of you, how do we define and identify a safe space, and what is a safe space?
I'll raise my hand. Yes. So for me, it has really taken a number of years to be able to define what a safe space is for me, because even spaces that I thought were safe or had assumed, or there was the pretext of this is a safe space for you, those spaces ended up not being safe. For example, the home environment, that became, as soon as there was this realization that I wasn't heterosexual, that it stopped being a safe space, and became quite a violent space, and a hurtful space. So if I look back at my life, my school, funny enough, high school was for me very safe with the regards that there wasn't the immediate threat to my well-being compared to what it was at home. So I was able to be musical, I was able to be dramatic, I was able to be part of a team, even if it was like, the last hockey team or whatever. But I was able to be involved in stuff and be able to express myself in sort of the multiple layers that I have as a person. And even with my sexuality, I was able to express myself in school and have people who would have my back when there was homophobia or any kind of discrimination. There were a handful of teachers who would, be in my corner if need be. In a very hyper masculine, very, toxic space with lots of testosterone. There was those people. And then I was able to find, through work, because I worked a number of years before being in university. And in the workspace, I, very, very easily was able to be myself, because I could choose where I wanted to work, with whom I wanted to work. So that's something to look forward to if someone is in a, home and school environment that isn't a safe space. So, but I've learned, as kind of identifying where home is for one person, my home travels with me and I travel a lot. So that's where my safe space is now. I've found a space within myself to be safe. And I think that begins with empathy for the self, compassion, and love for who you are.
Fabi, it'll be really interesting to hear you kind of touch on what that's like within the Joburg context. What are the safe spaces in Joburg? Are they like in secluded areas? And does it kind of tie back to the whole privilege thing about like, it being in the places where there is affluence and,
Yes, it 100% does. And I think that I used to think of a lot of spaces in Joburg as safe spaces. And now growing a bit older, being 22 now, seeing a lot of the spaces I used to identify in Joburg as safe spaces, maybe not as safe spaces. And that ties in heavily with my doing drag. Starting drag last year when was my debut? I think it was around July of last year. And I started realizing that places like Babylon, for example, which is located in Ilovo Muse, it's like the center of a really busy district with lots of money, was a safe space for me because I'm a cis white gay. Well, I do use they, but mostly go by he. So my privilege was very evident there because I fit into the parameters of the clientele that was wanted at Babylon for a really long time. And over the last couple of years, they've kind of expanded their clientele to include more people of color, more non-binary people, more trans people. But there is still this sort of reputation for it not being that inclusive. And you see that with Babylon, for example. And I love Babylon. Babylon's given me so many opportunities, especially in drag. Like, I've performed there so many times. I'm friends with the people who work there. Like, I really do love that place as a drag queen. As a critical sociologist, I'm not that fond of it. And it's pretty much the same thing with a lot of gay spaces in Joburg, even Johannesburg Pride, which for my personal security and my mental health, I'm not going to speak that much about because I've had a lot of confrontation with the owners of Pride. I'm not even going to mention them by name. But, last year Joburg Pride was located outside Sandton City. Like, it was located in the heart of capitalism, basically, within Johannesburg. And a lot of people, not just me, a lot of people realized a problem with that. Obviously, like, Pride was a huge opportunity for me last year because I got to meet Brooklyn Heights, the runner-up to season 12 of Drag Race, season 11 of Drag Race. And I got to do like a photo shoot with her inside Mercedes Benz, and it was like this incredible opportunity for me. But I almost felt really fraudulent in a way, because Pride is not supposed to be that. Pride is not supposed to be this thing that is elitist, and it has become that. But Pride has become this elitist, event where only certain types of people have access to it. And I don't agree with that. And I think that that's characteristic of a lot of the queer culture in Joburg. That being said, I'm really happy to see the rise of things like Vogue Nights Josie. I have not been. I do not feel like it's a place, it's my safe space, and I feel like it's not a place that is available to me. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that the ballroom culture has been appropriated enough by drag and appropriated enough by white gays. And it's amazing to see a space existing specifically for queer people of color to express themselves in, the most incredible ways, and admiring that from afar. And I think that that's one of the only really genuine places in Joburg that that does that and could be viewed as a safe space for everyone.
That's
I
really, really lovely to
love
hear.
so much. I love so much that Fabi, you and I specifically are speaking together, because everything you just said now is like almost like, I'm going to speak about my experience in Cape Town with regard to safe spaces, but your perceptions of Johannesburg, I thought, were really, really well informed and really apt. It's just that mine are like the exact converse,
Yeah.
where it's really interesting. I think it's so interesting because Babylon, for me, I've been twice when I went to Joburg for work, and it was just so like apparent how problematic and uncomfortable the space was for me as a queer person of color.
Yeah.
And how like almost like I was being demanded to be gay in that space and not anything else. And it's so I find it so interesting, the points that you brought up about gay pride, because the first pride in South Africa was held in 1995 in Johannesburg. It wasn't in Cape Town. And I think I love the points that you made, because there's such a distinction, there's such a difference between celebration and pageantry. And I think that pride has almost become this kind of this pageant and this kind of event that is no longer at its base core a celebration of what it stands for. It's rather a showboat. Hence the Sandton City kind of presentation and that kind of thing, which I thought was so interesting. Vogue Josie Ball Nights, like when you said I haven't been yet, I was like, because living in Cape Town, it's like, I think it's probably, besides Death of Glitter, which is a party that happens in Cape Town, which I'll talk about now.
Yes, I've been.
That's probably like Vogue Josie Nights is like probably like the party that I want to go to the most in the country that I'm from. And I just found it so refreshing and so interesting to understand your view and your feeling that while it's a safe space for so many, you don't necessarily feel that it's accessible to you in that way. And I feel exactly the same way about Babylon, which I think is really interesting.
If I can respond to that, I do think it's accessible to me, but I think that that's a problem, because I have access to pretty much every safe space, but the people that go
no, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I'd love to go, especially in drag, but yeah, I think I'd rather like be invited into the space rather than showing up and, yes, kiki, whatever.
Yeah. With regard to safe spaces, and I just wanted to kind of respond to you first before speaking about my interpretation of safe spaces, because I thought you raised such great points. I always think about safe spaces as, I don't know which song it is by Blood Orange, but it features Janet Mock on it. And she basically has a verse at the beginning where she speaks about what family is. And then she speaks about how you don't need to diminish yourself or censor yourself, and you can show up and be whoever you need to be. And you don't have to be anything. And that kind of, I mean, let me just see if I can find it quickly. In essence, that's her sentiment about family, but for me, that's kind of what I quantify as safe space as being. It's somewhere where I don't actually need to perform, and I don't need to perform as someone who performs happily, if that makes sense. And for me, very often, my point is safe spaces end up culminating not only as home and domestic spaces, but I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying this, but clubs are just so I have had the most intimate and wonderful and comforting moments in my life going to clubs. And I think, so I mentioned Death of Glitter, which is a party that a very, very dear friend of mine, Taj McLeay, throws.
Yes.
Their DJ name is Drag Mother. And it's an incredible party. It's one of the only spaces, I think, in Cape Town that feels so welcoming and inclusive of just about anyone for the most part. And obviously there are issues with regard to accessibility and stuff, but the entrance is, I think, around 30 Rand. And it usually, no, it's not 30 Rand. I'm thinking of something else. I can't remember how much it is, but it's you just get to see like this kind of unhinged energy from people that's very natural and very accepted. And that for me is really beautiful. I think I found that quote, by the way. So she speaks about it. She says, it's a place of community. I think of spaces where you don't have to shrink yourself, where you don't have to pretend or to perform. You can fully show up and be vulnerable and in silence, completely empty. And that's completely enough. You show up and you are without judgment, without ridicule, without fear or violence or policing or containment. And you can be there and you're filled all the way up. Which I think is really beautiful. And it's like so ideal. I mean, Janet Mock is basically the future president of America when America gets its shit. But like it's a very ideal sentiment, I know, but at its core, and if I were to look at a kind of a manifesto of what I'd want a safe space to be, that kind of, you know, highlights everything. Yeah. So for me, I think the only thing I wanted to contribute there with regard to my views on safe spaces is how often I have found so much sanctity in a club environment. And specifically gay club environments and queer club environments. I'm not talking about bars and pubs and things. I'm very specifically talking about spaces that are created for us. I'm gonna
pause right here. We're gonna have a break, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back. We have returned. The formation might have shifted a little bit. We were having some technical difficulties, but
the internet is homophobic.
It really is.
No further comment, but before the break and before the little connection issue, Githan was unpacking and speaking about gay club culture, and we was within the sort of discussion about safe spaces, and it would really be interesting, you know, to hear you continue that discussion.
I think, I mean, I can't remember the last thing I was saying, but I think the last thing I do want to say probably on it is, and just to connect to how I started the conversation, commenting on what Fabi said, it's really interesting how you can say, or how I do feel that specifically gay club spaces are, for me, definitively safe, but at the same time, some are safer than others. And
Yes.
not, you know, it's not a mutually exclusive buy-in. You can't just say a club space is safe. You can't say that a gay club space is safe. It's like a very specific inu of queer space that you can exist in. And I think there's something really beautiful about that, because it speaks very highly to how multifaceted and how there's such a spectrum of you know, queer presence and queer representation that needs to be fed and needs to be, you know, loved and cherished and celebrated in its own capacities, kind of like hence this web series. But I do think it's something. I mean, I'd like to hear your opinions on it, actually. That was my point, that I think it's so interesting that you can have two queer spaces that are, or gay spaces that are comfortable to two different entities, but the antithesis for the other.
I really liked, if I could comment, I really liked what Viwe said about safe spaces not just being a physical space and actually being your chosen family, your queer family.
Absolutely.
Like, for example, I went through a really tough breakup in February, and I had a gig. I had to, you know, breaking up on the Wednesday, cross-dressing on the Saturday, and I was like, I was such a mess. Like, I was crying, and like my boss told me not to come to work because she was like, "Girl, you look like shit. Please go home." And then I saw like my best Judy's on the Saturday, and that feels like a safe space to me. People feel like a safe space to me as well, as a physical safe space. Like the love that other queer people are able to show for each other, and that shared understanding of your feelings and your emotions and being able to be vulnerable, I think is also a safe space. And I think that that's really beautiful and speaks kind of to what you were saying, Githan, about that feeling of love and understanding. It reminds me also of a song called I Know a Place. They used it in Tales of the City, and they've used it in a few queer shows, but it's a song about Pulse, about the shooting that happened at Pulse. And the main premise of the song, the main lyrics are, "I know a place where you can lay down your weapons." And I think that kind of encapsulates for me what queer safe spaces are, because it's a place where, for the most part, you can lay down your weapons, whether they be ideological or emotional or, you know, guards that you've built up, and you can really, you know, be yourself in a sense.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we're tired, you know?
Yeah.
You know, you get home from work and you're tired. And you want to be with, I mean, safe spaces aren't about, like you say, the spaces. They're about the people that are in the spaces. And yeah, Viwe, what did you think? Sorry, I actually really wanted to hear.
No, absolutely. I definitely agree with you that there are definitely like spaces where people, you know, can kind of find safe spaces or not safe, a place not safe, you know, because of who goes there and what goes on there. And I think I love the fact that, Fabi, you recognized that Jersey Vogue Nights might not is a safe space, but your presence there, if you were to insert yourself there, it would stop being a safe space for some people.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily by anything that you have done, or, you know, or who you are, but it's just what your presence there recognizes. So, like, you know, I wouldn't be able to go into, let's say, any other kind of identity that I don't personally identify, even if there are commonalities in who we are, the people that are there, and myself. But my presence there might be violating that the safety of the space. And I think, a lot of people find Cape Town to be, I live in Cape Town, and so a lot of people find Cape Town to be like, the pink city, the rainbow city, or whatever, gay central. But it is not always a safe space for people from certain backgrounds and of people of certain identity. But even as a Black gay person, I'm able to find my queer safe spaces there. And it's not necessarily all bad or unsafe, but there are places and spaces which one can go into which won't be safe. And I think just having a gay or queer space does not necessarily mean that space will be queer and safe. Will be a safe space. The intention for safety, I think, needs to be there, and I think there needs to be a zero tolerance for people that are going to violate the space, for actions that are going to violate the space, and there has to be a definite a consciousness and an intention to be inclusive for it to be safe.
Just talking about Cape Town, because obviously I live in Joburg, and I don't know, I think I might be the only one who does in this chat. But
who does in South Africa?
But my ex-boyfriend lives in Cape Town. I was in a long-distance relationship with him. So kind of coming between Joburg and Cape Town and seeing the difference, it's very obvious in my opinion. But my experience, like being a gay person and walking on the street and going in Ubers and stuff like that, was actually very different in Cape Town in the negative. And I actually experienced a lot more homophobia and fear to be openly gay walking around in Cape Town than I do in Joburg, which I don't think a lot of people expect. But yeah, like obviously my boyfriend at the time lived there, and if I was like too gay or like tried to be affectionate with him or anything, like he would be like, Fabi, stop, like you're gonna get us like in trouble, you need to relax. And I've never experienced that in Joburg. Well, not never, but not to that level of like ingrained sort of fear, I guess.
I think it's really interesting because I also live between the two cities because I study in Cape Town, but Joburg is home. Like right now I'm in Joburg, and Bonnie spoke about this last week in the lesbian conversation, speaking about how, she also lives between the two cities, and spoke about how it is that way as well, for women, for queer people, that when you do get to Cape Town, because of how Joburg has everything is far, you have to drive everywhere, so you're sheltered within the little vehicle, but in Cape Town there's a lot of walking, a lot of public transportation that's taken, so there is a lot more, I guess, like just opportunity for you to be criticized, and for people to have their opinions about you, and people have their opinions regardless, but it's just like when there are so many people walking in Cape Town and so many people kind of who have their own opinions about you, it does really take a toll on your mental health in ways. So you do learn ways too. And it's really interesting because the next point of our discussion is masc femme. But, even, if you are like really femme, you mold your gender expression, to be a little bit more, to present a bit more acceptable, but it's kind of like, it's really absurd that we have to conform to this societal norm in a way. But it would be really interesting to hear from you about from each one of you about masc femme and the balance, and where you find comfort in that spectrum. Like, where do you find the most comfort in your gender expression in that regard?
I think just before we go into sort of the masc femme, just no way point, but I think it would be for me very interesting to kind of do an exploration of how much do we, with regards to the safety of, for example, Joburg, Cape Town, and our experiences of being confronted with queer phobia, how much of it is like, we accept that Cape Town, for example, for me, would be I know this is like how Cape Town people are. And so when they're behaving like this, I almost write it off because I'm so used to it. But then when I go to Joburg, it's different people. They speak a different language, perhaps, and it's a new environment. So everything else, I've become more, I don't know, more vigilant to how this experience is going to be. And so, yeah, just a by note for further discussion another day.
No, but
forgive me for 1 second. I need to just shift a little bit. My laptop's overheating in the sun. But
okay.
Please carry on talking.
All right. But I think it really is important, Viwe, that, you know, within, you know, our community, that we prioritize safety within those safe spaces above all else. Like you were saying, you know, having zero tolerance for a lot of things. But, you know, I can't remember who was saying it just now, but they were saying that, like, I think it was Viwe saying that, you know, when you go into a safe space and in danger of safe space, it isn't always by your own doing, but sometimes it is, you know, like some people actively go into spaces and, you know, perpetuate, you know, negative things that, you know, shouldn't exist in our community, you know, like when, I don't know if you guys have heard about that 1 in 9 campaign that happened a few years ago at Joburg Pride, where, you know, women went to go and march, you know, in the hopes that, you know, and went in, I apologize for getting the details wrong, but they went there to observe moments of silence, but they were met with just such like harsh criticism and negative, you know, kind of everyone was like aggression, you know, and it's awful. It's awful that, you know, we have to hate on other queers, you know, for expressing their queerness, you know, in the way that they want to express it. And it's kind of just, it's terrible that that has to happen, you know. So I think, but you know, it's really important that, you know, we try as best as we can to prioritize the safety within the community, even though it is really hard because we don't have control over every single person, you know, and we, you know, not everyone sees, you know, eye to eye, but it's really important for us to have discussions like this so that we can highlight the problems in our community and that they don't go kind of like unnoticed or unspoken about, you know, because that's really where the change begins.
Yeah, I mean, I had an experience with this last year, actually. And last point on this, I think, unless anyone wants to add, but before we go into the talk about mask femme and the binary, a man last year at Babylon, I did a drag gig. There was a Lady Gaga tribute, actually, that I did. And a man showed up after the performances in a MAGA hat, a Make America Great Again, like, bad hat. And me being a drag queen, obviously, I lost my shit because I was like, I did not just get up on stage tucked with a, you know, pride flag waving, but, you know, singing Born This Way for you to show up in this MAGA hat. And the response was really disgusting because, and you know, if Babylon has a problem with me speaking about this, then deuces. But the response was really disgusting because I had to leave because I confronted him. And I was like, get out, this is disgusting. Like, and I'm not kidding you, this man walked in and between 20 and 50 people left, queer people, saw the hat and were like, bye, I'm not dying tonight. That's literally the mentality immediately. But, you know, me being stupid, I walked up to him and started screaming.
Speak your mind.
I had to leave, and the host, I won't mention him by name, you know, for his privacy, but the host at Babylon also had to leave because he also had a problem with another client and then with this guy, and all the people that ended up bringing this problem to the manager's attention and to other people's attention ended up having to leave. And this man was allowed stay in a club. And I watched it because I've realized maybe the intention behind Babylon is to make money, and gay people love to spend money.
Excuse me while I just...
Yeah, you know, it's obviously about money. Exactly. You know, and it's, as I said, it's located in the heart of privilege. Like, you have tons of people going there buying bottles, buying, you know, spending racks on racks on racks, you know, to have a good time. And I think that that's why it's open. So when it came down to actually prioritizing queer people, they were like, sorry, this person's a paying client, you know, never mind the fact that you perform like every Saturday and bring up to 1,000 people to our establishment, but you're
Yeah,
gonna have to leave.
I don't know if this is something that we put in the points for this conversation, but like the pink dollar is a real thing, and it's something that is very specifically connected to gay men. In the acronym, it's specifically connected to those affluent, rich honeys living in the Upper East Side with their 2 dogs because they haven't decided to adopt yet. Like, you know, it's really, and it's such an interesting thing to me because like there's so much corruption that comes into that money, and I think that's exactly what Fabi was just touching on now, and why I'm bringing it up, because there's just like shit hits the fan when that stuff comes into play, and like the power struggles and the power dynamics just begin emulating and replicating Hitz's patriarchy again. And I think that's one of the biggest criticisms that we can have really in this conversation, specifically about gay culture, not about lesbian culture, not about intersex culture, not about non-binary culture, but specifically about gay culture. And something that's very unique with gay culture is the way in which we are so disastrously emulating like Hipster's patriarchy in an attempt to thrive in our own capacities, and in an attempt to, I think it's a very singular issue that we have in our community, that a lot of other, to an extent that I think other members of the acronym community do share, but I think like we make an art form out of it, if you know what I mean. You know?
Out of classism.
Sorry?
Yeah, I said out of classism.
Yeah, no, we do. We
Classism within the gay
do.
community.
Like, and
I think it actually speaks.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Yes. But I think it speaks to, you know, the binary of, you know, the masc femme, top bottom kind of binary, because again, it's about who's the man and who's the woman. And I think a lot of people with the financial means do put their money, and I think it possibly played, you know, even without knowing who this person was with the MAGA hat. But I think this, I don't know, reverence for the masculine within the gay community, and, you know, who's passing and who's, you know, straight acting. So it's like those are the people that are acceptable, and those are the ideal, the iconic people, you know. Even the 2 sort of honeys living up on the Upper East Side with their 2 puppies, those will be sort of masc for masc, you know, people, but still also emulating that whole cis heteronormative like experience.
Well, I don't know if we can call them puppies, because that's a whole nother discussion. Girl.
Promise I wouldn't come out as a furry till I was 30.
Yeah, first of all, very nice segue into the masc femme discussion.
Yeah, well done on that. I love that you did that. I was
very,
like,
that's how you know she's a writer.
Period.
I was like, someone called Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm good.
I'm about to drop my jade egg right now. But yeah, like the masc femme discussion, I think as a drag queen, I have some things to say, because as a man, I present as a man. I present somewhat masculinely, however we are going to define masculine, feminine, whatever. And then as a drag queen, I'm like very, I don't think I look like a woman. by any means. My whole point of drag has been like
Going
exaggeration
on
and stuff.
Instagram right now.
But she's stunning
I know.
though. But Mama's stunning.
My
Boban is
handle,
stunning though.
Bowline. I haven't posted in since February, but like, have fun, get into it. So I actually encountered something very interesting when I started drag, right? Because I'm a Portuguese man. I grow lots. I'm very hairy. And part of what I wanted to do when I started drag was be a bearded queen and have hair. Because not only is it practical for me, shaving my entire body takes like 4 days, but from a gender standpoint, gender and like doing drag and performing drag was about confronting gender, confronting normative practices of gender, right? Because I think that's what drag is about. But I was confronted with two things. One was that my drag mother told me that drag is not political. Okay, absorb it, take it in, enjoy that. Drag is not political. We are there to entertain people, and part of entertaining people is not bringing up politics. Okay. I'm a sociology honor student, so like most of my discourse is around criticizing society. But yeah, and then the other thing that people told me was that I couldn't be a bearded queen, I couldn't be a hairy queen because it wouldn't sell, and I wouldn't get booked, and I wouldn't make money, and I would never work in Joburg. So Sis started shaving his face and his arms and everything, and I started getting booked and I started getting paid. And don't get me wrong, it gave me like amazing opportunities. I met Alaska Thunderfuck, I met Detox, I met Brooklyn Heights. You know, like I've met amazing people and expanded my friendship circle to include so many different kinds of people, people of color, non-binary people, trans people, and it's been the most fulfilling experience learning about the binary by challenging it. But the standards around drag actually are kind of, if I can, I don't know, am I allowed to swear?
Go for it.
They're fucked. Like, they are so fucked because there is still this perception like, I am a man in a bodysuit from Mr. Price and a wig from China Mall, and you are telling me that I can't have a beard, like, or that women can't have hair. Like, you're willing to entertain the fact that I am parodying gender to this extent, but because I look fish, which is a term that in 2020 we're not using fish, but like because I look like a woman, it's okay. And women don't have body hair. So like seeing how gay men replicate heteronormative ideas of gender within their own community. Like you can be a man, you can dress as a woman, but you have to do it in the most patriarchal, heterosexual way. And it's gross.
It is.
It's terrible. I think, it speaks to just like the alarming amount of gatekeeping that happens in the community. It's like, people gatekeeping each other's identities. Oh, you're too femme, you're too mask, you're not mask enough. You look a certain way, so you should dress this way. Your body works with this. It's people trying to put people into boxes. And the fact is
This kind of rampant
doesn't work.
behavior, though. This kind of rampant behavior, again, it's like, I don't think that it's as prevalent in other community groups as much as it is amidst gay men. Like, we are so hell-bent on just knowing exactly what we're getting and not deferring from it. And I honestly think it comes from very severe public trauma, because I think the gay experience has not been publicly outed, literally, and publicly lived as much like as other, like people are so, how do I put this into words that everyone will understand? I just think that like we like never really came to terms with being gay in our own capacities. It's always happened in a public sphere. And that's not to say that it didn't happen in a public sphere for lesbian communities and transgender communities, but it's like we were always a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something about a level of performance that has stuck with us and that is still held and connected to us, where we need to perform very specific caricatures, even in our communities today, in order to get by, because we have not we have not gotten rid of that kind of pain and that kind of trauma of being so starkly aligned to either this kind of representation or that kind of representation.
I agree.
And I think it also kind of speaks to, I mean, definitely what you're saying, and I think it speaks to almost like a generational trauma, intergenerational trauma, because it's passed down from like generations of gay men, because of you know, of the liberation movements and stuff, of having to, what it takes to get to that point where we are saying, okay, we are done with the, you know, oppression and whatever. But it's almost like older gay men, especially in their mentoring of younger gay men, are like, okay, you can, whoever you are, you can be gay. It's absolutely fine, but be gay in this way, because it didn't take all of this fighting that we did for your rights, for you to go around and be feminine or be a femme gay. You know, we fought for. Yeah, I mean, it's making sense in my head because I have all these dots connecting, because I've been watching and doing a lot of history around sort of queer and gay, specifically gay movements. And it's just how people were and how they were oppressed, that it actually, I almost feel like it came into the DNA and to the genetics of gay men, and into perhaps the social kind of DNA of gay men, to kind of be socialized and continue and perpetuate this. You have to be gay and still wear a suit. You can, like, you know, whoever you have sex with is absolutely fine, but just wear a suit, you know, and present like a man. And so that's the, and again, going back to the idealization of, or idolization of the mask gay. You know, you can totally have like six pack and big arms, and wear a tutu. But as long as you have a beard after all of that, and you know, we'll accept it, even if you're a trashy person. You know, and we see that with how media, how media has chosen to show particular, like, you know, celebrities, or the, you know, celebrity story, focus on certain celebrity stories and certain stories around about homosexuals and homosexuality, but using the same character, perhaps even in a different body.
Fully, I agree. I also think, like, you know, kind of going back to the whole idolization of the mask gay, it's what's represented in mainstream media, to the point where, like, it's really hard to find a gay character or a queer character that you can truly resonate with, because you can't, you know, look in the mirror, or, you know, at least, or see them as a mirror, you know, or see them as, oh, I can, you know, I relate to you, you know, because they're either perfect bodies, perfect hair, perfect skin, this perfection, you know, and we, you know, hold ourselves to these impossible beauty standards because it's what's been set, you know, and it's really, it's, you know, it does us in, you know. There's a lot of mental health that, you know,
my favorite, like, just on that point, like, one of my favorite examples of that is how Call Me By Your Name has become like such a cult following for the straights, and like they love it. They love the aesthetics, they love the story, they love the way that she looks like, and like it so summarizes and culminates, because for me as a gay man, that movie is just, and I've tried, it does not sit well with me. It really doesn't sit well with me. Like, what I mean by that, let me put it in different words. It's not that it doesn't sit well with me, it's boring. I don't find it interesting. There's nothing that I can really hold grips to and feel connected to or feel enthralled by. Some of the visuals are really pretty, and I really like Sufjan Stevens when I'm having a bad day and I need some depressing music. But besides that, like, I think it's so fascinating how straight people have just run with this narrative, and they are like, they're the reason why it's such a phenomenon. They're the reason why there's a second one coming out. It's not because of gay people. It's because of straight people who are obsessed with this ideal of what a gay man is. This gay man that is not nearly in any way accessible to any of us.
And they're not even gay men.
If I can just share that, I can't remember who it was that said this, but it was with regards to race. And I think it was like we're having a political discussion. And they said, as a Black person, if you, as a Black person who's in politics or in any form of activism, and white people like you, you should be worried. And I think it also goes, you know, you can kind of extrapolate from that, and I think rightly so, Githan, with the with gay media, if it really sits well and the straights absolutely love it, it probably is not the representation that we need, and it isn't what reality of the gay experience is.
Because it's spoon feeding. It's spoon feeding the wrong audience. Clearly.
Yeah. Look at Drag Race, for example.
Oh my God.
If I can shake the table.
Drag Race used to be this really gritty thing. I mean, they put Vaseline on the lens, for God's sake, in season 1. Like, what?
We all know that was Crisco.
What has become of her?
If you try and explain trans misogyny and RuPaul and just the issues with RuPaul to straight audiences for Drag Race, they won't get it.
They don't understand. They also don't understand. No, you go. All
right. Like, I mean, I'm friends with a non-binary drag queen, an AFAB non-binary drag queen, and seeing the struggles that they have faced as a result of Drag Race has been so aggravating. Because now Drag Race caters to a straight audience, and so does a lot of drag, to be fair. It's all about how much you pass, etc., etc. But Drag Race has started catering to a straight audience. Like, I don't know who's watched the most recent episode, but Daisy Ridley was a guest judge. And there's that moment where she says, "Yas, queen, work." And for me, like, my soul left my body. I felt like I was, you know, using a fleet enema. Like, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, that level
looking away.
that level of discomfort, like, but the straights are gonna eat that up because there's a heterosexual. I don't know if she's heterosexual, actually. But exactly, she's from Star Wars, so now what? Are we gonna have, like, gamer Twitter and, like, incels watching Drag Race because Daisy Ridley was like, "Yas, queen, work"? You know what I'm saying? I don't want to see Daisy Ridley. I loved her in Star Wars. The fuck do you know about drag, sis? Like,
this is the thing.
Sorry to shake the table.